so long since I felt your skin. It's been so long since I listened in to one of your shells and the song of your sea. Princess of the ocean, won't you come with me? Take my hand and come with me, darling, down to the shore.
Hello and welcome to the Nature Garden Podcast with me, Carl Steinson, and the weekending show team from Lionheart Radio. It's a chance to take a wander down the garden path and country lane with the birds and the bees and the flowers and trees, and an opportunity to hear stories from the past and present. In this episode, tree planting and Christmas trees with Tom and how you can help save the planet. Steve Lowe is out and about with nature on a classic countryside walk. Tom Cadwallander is celebrating festive birds and looking at the story behind the popular song The 12 Days of Christmas. And we've got more great top tips and inspiration on Christmas trees from Tom and some jobs for the week. All coming up on the Nature Garden Podcast.
Down to the shoreline. Take my hand and come with me, darling, down to the shoreline. Take my hand and come with me, darling, down to the shoreline.
We're on our way into winter, and while it may seem that trees and plants are dead or dying off, it's actually a great opportunity to plant some things, and Tom Pattinson's here to explain why this really is a time for trees.
This week I wanted to flag up the importance of trees in our lives. Throughout the world, let alone in our own country, trees in massive forests, tropical forests, trees in the countryside, trees in parks and gardens. They're so important to us in different ways. Remember, since the beginning of time, humankind, have relied upon trees to provide warmth, fire, shelter, ships, furniture, and so it goes on. Today, look around you, look at a simple building site and look at the roofs, timbers going into the houses on a building site. But there are so many examples of timber still being in great demand today, in practical demand. Trees are good at water management. If there is a boggy area or an area of wetland, huge area of wetland, plant certain trees on it and they will thrive and they will process water up through their roots, off into the atmosphere through the leaves, and they manage wetlands in that way. Their roots are good at stabilising embankments, limiting soil erosion. Think of a motorway and the embankments either side, which have cut through the landscape for the motorway. What do they plant on those embankments? Trees, because the roots make a solid embankment. Trees, and this is the big one, they use carbon dioxide. Carbon is a problem in our modern world. It's an increasing problem. But trees need carbon dioxide to use in the photosynthetic process. Photosynthesis, they absorb carbon dioxide from the air and they give off oxygen in that food-making process. They're a habitat for animals. Think of a simple ecosystem. An oak tree is a brilliant example. The number of invertebrates and vertebrates that it can support is amazing, and different trees support different ecosystems. Think of that on a worldwide stage. Amazing. In cities, they help dissipate those noxious chemicals emitted by vehicles, and their very presence is so reassuring. Trees are an infinite resource if we treat them carefully. Raised in managed forests, Kielder for example, they're raised from seed. They take quite a while to develop to maturity, but they are used by humankind to the best advantage. So, bearing all this in mind, no wonder we have a week every year at the end of November for National Tree Week. It began in 1973 in response to an outbreak of Dutch elm disease in the early 70s, when our native elm trees were devastated by the elm bark beetle, which carried a fungus, Ophiostoma novo ulmi. The ulmi bit in the end relates to ulmus, which is the elm's botanical name. And the slogan went out, plant a tree in 73. That was the Tree Council. And over the time, this has increased the importance of it. During Plant a Tree Week, or during National Tree Week, there's more to it than just planting trees to replace those that are being lost throughout the world. Big thing is there are lectures, demonstrations, and exhibitions showing how important trees are to our modern day life and indeed to humankind and other animals on the planet. So trees are really important. Ash dieback is one of the most recent cholera, it's commonly called, diseases, or it's a fungal disease actually, causing dieback on our ash trees. Before that came the Great Storm of 1987, remember that? Millions of trees were flattened in the Great Storm, irrespective of what their type was. It just came overnight, and famously, this is the one where Michael Fish, the weather forecaster, someone rang in and said, I hear there's going to be a storm, is that true? And he said, no, there's not going to be a storm. But it came to pass. Another disease you may well have heard of is Phytophthora, a fungal disease that attacks the juniper, larch, Lawson cypress, and a wide range of trees and shrubs. But the biggest problem of it all at the moment is this gradual demise of worldwide forested areas, rainforests, forests which are not managed throughout the world, which support teeming wildlife. But the big one is, if those forests are being flattened in the name of progress by humankind, that is more carbon in the atmosphere. For goodness sake, support National Tree Week whenever it comes around. And if you think you want to plant a tree, there are various ways of doing it, more of that in a moment. You're not too late, because this is nature's planting time, and really it extends from now until the beginning of springtime in the absence of frost.
Ah, the old 12 days of Christmas. a song for bird lovers everywhere and one of War Tom Cadwallander's favourites. So much so that he's been having a gander at the origins of the song.
I suppose we're well into our Christmas songs at this time, Carl. And one of my favourites, is, probably because it's got quite a high ornithological content, is the 12 Days of Christmas. You know the one, it's the partridge in a pear tree one. But it's actually worth just sort of looking at a bit more detail at that song, because there, as I've mentioned, there is quite a lot of ornithological detail in there. You start with, on the first day, we've got partridge in a pear tree. Now, back in the day when this song was first published, which was in 1780, we had two species of partridge. There's the grey partridge, which is native to the UK, but also we had red-leg partridge, which is quite prevalent in these days too. It's released a lot for shooting purposes, so that we still see quite a lot of them around. But you think about it, and you think a grey partridge, actually, they don't normally perch in trees. So you kind of think, well, actually, it's a stretch of the imagination, that one. But, however, the red-legged partridge does perch in trees, and it's sometimes known as the French partridge as well, that one, by the way. So there's a good chance of the partridge in a pear being a red-legged variety. Then you go on to the second day of Christmas and the turtle dove. Now, Christmas and turtle doves generally don't go together unless they're in this song, because turtle doves come here during the summer to breed. So it's quite unseasonal. But back in the day when this song was made, they were quite widespread and quite common. But now, of course, the population has gone through a massive decline, and it's quite a rare bird right across the whole of the UK, with one or two little strongholds around. But because it was widespread, there's a good chance of it being held in captivity. So that could well have some sort of good resonance there. Then moving on to the third day of Christmas, where we have 3 French hens. These could be French chicks, because we did have a lot of French influence in those days. And as I've mentioned earlier about the red-legged partridge, that was occasionally known in folklore as the French partridge, so it could easily have been that one. And then we're getting on to 4 calling birds. Now, this is a little bit more difficult to pin down, because it's kind of, what does it mean, actually calling birds? But it's more likely to be a blackbird, because in the old versions, calling was actually collie birds. And collie is Old English for black or coal, so it's dark. So there was every chance of that. And of course, we had 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie back in the old nursery rhyme. So there's every chance of these calling birds or collie birds being blackbirds. And then you get into 5 gold rings. Now, there's some theory thinking, well, actually, the 5 gold rings could be 5 gold spinks or 5 goldfinch, which was a very, very, very common caged birds back in the time, because they've got a charming little song they have, and they were kept quite commonly in captivity. So yes, the gold spinks are, because it's an old name for the goldfinch, and it relates to the kind of the noise they make as well when they're flitting around. Or, and some people are suggesting, it could actually be referring to ring-necked pheasants. Pheasants were introduced to the UK in around that sort of time from North America, and they have this nice ring round their neck, and they've been released for shooting purposes. So it could well have been the rings around the pheasant's neck. And moving on to 6. Where we have 6 geese are laying. These are more likely to be greylags, because that was the most commonly held domesticated goose. And all of the domesticated geese that we have these days all come from the greylag stock, which is quite interesting in its own way. It's fascinating how all these things could have some sort of basis of truth in them. And then we get on to swans are swimming. These will more than likely have been mute swans. Mute swans were introduced to the UK by the Romans, so they've been with us quite a long time. Although there are swans which do come here in the wintertime. There's the whooper swans and the Buick swans. But the mute swans were the ones which were kind of semi-domesticated and mainly for food, and we still see them in quite big flocks on our rivers, and there's this great tradition of swan-upping on the Thames, and they're known as the Queen's birds. And the mute swan, was used more than regularly in great banquets, state banquets. So there's every chance of these being sort of being mute swans. And there's one or two other little sort of things which are quite difficult to pin down. And the drummer boys chorus there's two schools of thought on that one, but it's not sort of clear or fast. And it could have been based on woodpeckers. Great spotted woodpecker, which is a great drummer, of course, during the back end of the winter, and we hear them sort of using drumming to as they bash on trees, and they do that to kind of create or mark a territory, or trying to sort of set up the first sort of semblances of a territory. That's interesting. Or the drumming could actually refer to snipe, which is a wading bird and breeds in marshland, and it was much more common than it is today. And they have a habit of vibrating their outer tail feathers, and it's known as drumming. And this is used in display as well. So there's two forms of drumming which could actually fit the bill there quite easily. But all in all, there's a huge amount of ornithological content in there. So taking it basically, there's every chance that it could be approaching 200 birds you get as a gift for Christmas on this song. It's incredible, really. But yes, it's a fab one to sing. So next time you're singing about the 12th day of Christmas, just think about those birds that are in there, and you might get a surprise. So Merry Christmas, folks.
This is the Nature Garden Podcast.
If you've been inspired by Plant a Tree Week and you want to plant a tree yourself at home in the garden, then go for it. One piece of advice though, which is so important: think about the structure, the foundations of your house, and think about the roof. The reason for this is you can't just go planting an ash, a beech, an oak, an elm, tall growing trees so close if you've got a small garden. There's a strong chance of roots damaging the structure of your home, the base, and the canopy damaging the roof. In general terms, the canopy of a tree generally is reflected by the root system. So if the canopy is quite wide and it stretches over the roof area, not only does it block the light out, but it tells you that the roots are going to go as far as that underground, possibly further. And you must avoid that at all means. So if you want to find out about planting distances, and this is so important, go online, type in tree planting distances from structures, and you'll get a whole range of sites you can visit. And they'll start off with the smaller trees, ornamental trees, and the bigger trees, and how far to plant them to remain safe or keep your house safe from the structure. Straightforward. If you're going to plant something and it's a very small garden, say 3-4 meters from the front door to the front garden gate, then I'd go for things like dwarf conifers. They are not too invasive, the root system on those, and it takes them a long time to grow, to get any real height, dwarf or slow growing conifers. And you get a good range of evergreens, of course. Some of them are golden, some green, some tinged blue foliage. A good choice there. Beyond that, if you want to try something, say 4 or 5 meters away from the home, then things like the rowan berry, sorbus, mountain ash, same thing. The sorbus aucuparia is the mountain ash, and it has this beautiful red scarlet berries dangling from it in the autumn. It doesn't have to be that one though. It could be sorbus. Kashmiriana, which has white fruits, white berries, or Hupehensis, which has white berries which are tinged pink, something of that nature, or say a prunus, an ornamental cherry, one to flower in spring, or something that will flower in the autumn and through winter, like Prunus subhirtella autumnalis rosea, which is about 35 years old in my garden, and it's just about 5 metres away from the structure, and there is no problem with that. Look them up anyway and decide for yourself. If you don't have a garden at all, you simply have a backyard, or you live in a flat. If there's somewhere you can put a pot or a container, which your balcony say, and then you can grow them yourself. Remember, a bonsai is about growing things like pine trees, and some pine trees you see in bonsai exhibits, they're something between 30 to 60 centimetres tall, a foot to 2 feet tall, and they're 10, 20, 30 years old. The secret is, even though their roots are restricted in a container, they are watered frequently, and of course they're fed as well. They're in a healthy state. So if you wanted to start your own off, let's say you got some acorns from an oak tree and you sowed those in a pot, or you got horse chestnut, conker, fruit from the horse chestnut, and you put them in a pot and you put them outside during the winter so that the frost gets at them. Sometime beyond the next spring, they start germinating. And if you keep those in the pot yourself, then they'll grow on and they'll be restricted in the pot. And instead of the acorn growing into a mighty oak tree way above your head, it stays small within the pot, and you keep it healthy. Make sure look after it. That's a tree, a miniature tree, but a tree nonetheless. Go for this sort of thing. Don't be put off.
Well, as you probably know by now, we do like to get out and about and enjoy the beautiful countryside of Northumberland, and Steve Lowe from the Northumberland Rivers Trust is here to take us on a wonderful country walk along the leafy River Aln.
Oh, hey, that gives us a collie wobbles, I've got to say. Crossing the River Aln on stepping stones. The river's quite high today, so I had the right stride, but honestly I was thinking, what am I doing? Anyway, what a lovely day it is today again. I've walked up from Lesbury up to Berlin Mill and just slightly beyond, and I'm on my way back to Lesbury now, and it's a beautiful sunny day again, lovely blue skies. It's got an autumn feel to it, a little bit fresh, shall we say, but it's beautiful. And there's loads of birds are out again, all sorts of things, loads and loads of red wings. I've got loads of tits, long-tailed tits, blue tits, great tits, coal tits, you name it, they're all here. Loads of stuff calling. It's fantastic. If you haven't done this walk though, I'd definitely recommend it. It's fantastic. If you get out onto the initial start part of the path, start up near Lesbury, and you cross the old bridge at Lesbury, and you take just cross the main carriageway across near the new bridge, and then you'll see a sign that says public footpath, and you just basically follow that along. Really, you cannot really go wrong. And in fact, there's a lovely map at the beginning, which is slightly out of date, but it does warn you that if the river's really high, you can't get across at the stepping stones. But I thought I'd take a chance anyway, because I needed to walk the river for some tree planting that we're planning at the moment. So anyway, I've got quite a long way along it, and as I said, it's a really nice bit of countryside. Actually, I've never been along this stretch before. I'd certainly be coming back again because it is beautiful. The river itself's really quite interesting. It's a very mature bit of river, this, because it's getting close to Alnmouth, and it's sort of, is obviously come a canny way from the hills. It's quite wide, quite fast flowing. It goes largely through a wooded landscape, not all of it, which is why we want to put some more trees in, because there's bits where there's quite bare patches, but most of it's actually quite mature woodland, although a relatively thin strip. And I have to say, I don't think I've seen so many mallards on a river for a long time, and the place is absolutely lifting with them. Very little else in terms of the water birds, but obviously the woodland's absolutely alive with stuff. And you've got the ivy here that's just coming into flower, which might sound like a daft thing at this time of year, but it's when it flowers, when it gets pollen on, it's really good for bees at this time of year. And although, lots of people don't like ivy because it climbs up trees and apparently is supposed to strangle them, I don't think it actually does. It doesn't actually damage the trees themselves, apart from perhaps its weight once the tree's at a bad age and it's infirm anyway. But what a fantastic plant it is for cover, for greenery through the year. And then, as I say, at the end of the year, you get these pollen bearing flowers, and then berries, which are also edible for the birds and stuff. So, it's a good all-rounder, really. You cannot go wrong. So I'm just about to head back, halfway point, Lesbury 1.25 miles. Well, it was actually 2 and a bit miles on the way here, so I don't quite know. I must be going in a more direct route this way, but it's going to be good. I'm looking forward to it. And if you haven't done that walk, it's well worth a try. If you have a bit more time, you can walk on up through into Alnwick and turn around and come back along Hawks Hill, and that way, that's equally good. So I'm going to enjoy the rest of my walk. Mind, I've got to say I'm getting a bit sweaty. I've overdressed really for the weather. I'm just about to do the old crunching through the leaves bit as well into the farmland. So looking forward to this. Cheers.
Tom Cadwallander's definitely in the Christmas spirit, and he loves turkeys. In fact, he's stuffed with some really fascinating facts about them, and please do listen to the end as you'll realise why he really loves turkeys so much. Over to you, Tom.
Turkeys have long since been a traditional and a firm favourite as a focus to our Christmas lunches. And they've been around an awful long time. But it's worth thinking of the origins of how did the turkey become part of our Christmas fare, because it's not a straightforward one. It's not as you would think either, because turkeys are North American by origins, and there's 2 species of turkey. One is the ocellated, which is quite a rare bird, and it has sort of a lot more sort of markings on its head than the wild turkey. And the wild turkey is a more widespread bird of the North American plains and indeed in parts of northern Mexico. And they were almost hunted to extinction in the 19th century because they're, as you know, they're a big sort of beast of a bird, which is not a very good flyer, although they can fly, but it's generally more of a glide into the nearby trees for roosting. But they're big birds, not as big as the birds that we see in the market today, because obviously they've been kind of bred to develop their breasts for our table. But how the wild turkey came to Europe is quite an interesting one, because back in the 15th and 16th century, they were brought across to Europe and into the Middle East, and originally they were imported into Turkey, where they were quite seriously domesticated. Then they were brought back into Europe, and of course back in those days we tended to think that they're from Turkey, so they should be called turkey. So, and that's how the name is stuck. But during that time as well, they were re-imported as domesticated birds back into North America. And quickly the tradition of having turkey as Thanksgiving became quite the de facto thing you did. So the Thanksgiving turkey actually came from Europe, which is quite mind-blowing in its own way. But yes, it's there. It's a tradition these days. This is what happens. And goodness me, they're farmed and quite big numbers. But actually, in North America now, the population is quite well established. The wild bird population is quite well established, so they're quite it's quite stable. So it's pretty good actually. So you can go out into the plains and see wild turkeys for yourself. But it's you think a bit more detail about the life cycle of these birds, and they strut around, and they're quite spectacular in their own ways. The males are called toms, the young males are called jakes, but the females, boringly, are just called hens. But I do like the idea of a male turkey being called a tom, and that adds an extra little bit of fascination to the whole thing. But yeah, so it's not all that it makes out to be, this turkey tradition. But anyway, there we are. So I hope you enjoy yours if you're having turkey for Christmas. Merry Christmas, folks.
And so, to the sounds of the dawn chorus at West Chevington, let's join Tom for some jobs for the week and some top tips on Christmas trees.
And so to jobs for the week. 2 jobs really outstanding. First and foremost is we've had frost recently, and it's affected the dahlia tops for a start. So I'm digging the dahlias out, some of the tubers, because I want to put them into the greenhouse at the turn of the year and take some cuttings from the young shoots that come to increase my stock of 1 or 2 dahlias, which are quite special to me. The other ones I can just leave them in the soil. They will be okay. But look around the other plants in the garden and make sure you haven't left something out that is frost tender. If you can take it into the greenhouse, if you have a greenhouse, or take it indoors somewhere to protect it, fine. If you can't, you have to protect it in situ, where it stands, where it sits in the garden. And several ways of doing that. Fleece, of course, around it, build something around it. Or you can put a bit of soil up around you just mound it a little bit up around the sides of the plant. If you're going to cover one altogether, put some straw on the ground and put a bit of soil on the top to weigh it down. Just check everything's okay out in the garden. But the biggie this week, the big job, is getting a Christmas tree. Christmas tree, oh Christmas tree, which shall I have? 1, 2 or 3? And I'm talking about the 3 different groups. The first one is the growing tree, that one which is in a pot with its roots active, and you can have it from year on year. You'll see them, they're fairly expensive to buy, I suppose, relatively so. About 60 centimetres tall, 2 feet tall. Take them into the house, of course. They need a drip tray because they are growing. There'll be a drainage in the bottom of the pot. You've got to water them regularly, and you don't want any soily water on the carpet. So get a drip tray underneath that pot, a large drip tray, I guess, and then stand the growing tree in a well-lit room, the coolest room in the house, which doesn't necessarily keep all of the residents in the house happy, but it'll last longer and stay fresher in the coolest room in the house. And remember, you have to water it regularly because it's growing and will be processing water up through the plant, through the needles, through transpiration. You can get them about 4 feet tall as well. They're expensive as they get bigger. But here's the big thing. When Christmas is over, you take it outside into the garden, you dig a hole in an open part of the garden where there's going to be some sun, and you plunge the pot just below the surface with the plant growing in it, the Christmas tree growing in it. And during the summer, when it gets really hot, the sun doesn't bake down onto the compost in the pot because it's hidden just below the surface. And remember to water it. The second group is the artificial tree. They can be very expensive for top-of-the-range artificial trees, but the benefit of them is you can fold them up, put them in the loft when Christmas is over, and you don't have to go searching for a Christmas tree next year because you've got one in the loft. Get it out of there, dust it down, and set it up again. Really, artificial Christmas trees have improved over the years. They really have. They were stood out a mile before, but now, if you see one standing alongside a growing tree, a fresh tree, then you've got to get really close up to tell the difference. So artificial tree is a possibility. And my group 3 is the one which seems to be most popular because 6 to 8 million are sold every year at this time. The cut tree, cut Christmas tree. And the most popular seems to be RBS nordmanniana. That's the Nordman fir. It's the one that has a reputation for hanging on to its needles. But even though it has this reputation, occasionally it'll lose some needles. So I do a belt and braces job with them. As soon as I get it home, I cut bottom 4 centimetres to 6 centimetres, say around 5 centimetres off the base of the trunk, and I plunge it straight into water, because then you've just exposed some of the active cells which will take up water. It'll draw it, translocate it up through the stem and out through the needles at the top. For this reason, I grow them in a clamp and stand which has a reservoir attached, so I can top up the water every day. And a typical 6 feet tall Christmas tree bears about 20,000 needles, and it can process half a litre to a litre of water every day through the plant and out through the needles at the top. So you need to replace that water. If it's a warm room, it'll get rid of more water. Keep it well watered, keep it topped up, and it will be fine. So choose your Christmas tree and enjoy it. Enjoy your gardening, and Merry Christmas, everyone.
You've been listening to Gardener Tom Pattinson, birder Tom Cadwallander from the British Trust for Ornithology, and Steve Lowe from the Northumberland Rivers Trust. I'm Carl Steinson, and do check out our Twitter and Facebook page, The Nature Garden, and our website, The Nature Garden Notebook, and we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with an end of the year report and some more Christmas cheer. In the meantime, enjoy your garden and nature. Bye for now.